Hi, welcome back to Good Neighbors Getting It Done in Western New York. I'm Kathleen King. On this episode, we have two items. The first is Kevin Stocker, who is running for Congress in the 23rd District, had a campaign stop. We have a couple of clips from that. He was speaking to primary voters, Democratic primary voters in Hamburg. And it's just to give you a flavor of who he is. I will also put up the full campaign stop and event on another podcast for those who are interested in the 23rd.
So I'll just introduce myself, Kevin Stocker. Somebody asked me in Owego, why do you think you could do this? It's a red district. Can't be done. I actually better $20 that I can do it. So one of the reasons why I think it can be done is when I ran for New York State Senate, it took me a year and a half, but I went to every street and every municipality. And the one thing that I love to do is I give a card and I tell them, you're my future boss. This is my home phone number. If there's anything you ever need for you, your family, or community, feel free to call. When people call and I return the call, they start laughing because they don't think people are going to return their call. That's a sad state of affairs. But they're so shocked when you show up at their home. And again, I tell them, I come to your community, one, to pay respect and to listen to your concerns.
So here's my question for you,
Yes.
Mr. Stocker. Do you believe that we are in a climate energy crisis, an emergency, and will you, if elected, focus on legislation that will promote a renewable energy economy?
Well, thank you for the question. Your question's perfect timing since I just bought my first electric car. We have to protect our environment. It's very important. I do believe going solar with the technology that I see coming from China, which I believe we should create those jobs here and we should invest in those jobs. I do believe the big war coming up is with AI and the elimination of jobs. I saw an expert talk that he felt that in 5 years' time, AI is going to eliminate 50% of all jobs currently in existence. I think that's frightening. I think we as a community need to get out in front and retrain and know how to serve AI, prepare AI, program AI, and get out in front. So communities such as Hamburg or Owego retraining so we get ahead of the curve for jobs. So in that process, we have to protect the environment. Very important. I do believe solar is our future. This is coming. How fast? I can't tell you that. So by going in this direction, I do believe it's better for the environment. I believe we have to protect our environment. So I've been labeled by the Buffalo News as a rebel and a maverick because I've taken on the bosses and things of that nature. And, so to give you an example, I don't think I'm necessarily a rebel. But when I took on Tonawanda Coke and the party bosses came to me and said, you can't do that. They give us too much money. I said, what are you talking about? They're giving our community cancer. So
when did that happen?
that was quite a few years ago. That was before the federal government prosecuted Tonawanda Coke. But I was running for New York State Assembly back then, and I did a literature piece. It was very shocking, but I thought it got to the point. I had Tonawanda Coke with their stacks, and I had a gravestone, rest in peace, and a bag of political cash next to it. And I think that's something that's important to keep communities safe and healthy.
I'm not sure in what way did you take them on?
With the literature piece and the party bosses saying you can't talk about these issues.
So you took them on
politically. I've also, I was involved with a lawsuit when they had a small class action. It was in front of Judge Farrelletto. A lot of people don't know this, but I partnered up with Ross Salino. You see him on the TVs, and we were going to do a larger class action and that's when they announced their bankruptcy. So I'm not trying to convey that I'm anti-manufacturing. I want jobs for families to support themselves. but I want them to do it in an environmentally friendly way.
Look at this room. Where's the young people in here? Every
don't
time
see
we
it.
have a meeting, it's
Right.
always
I get it.
women from the
And they don't
60s,
vote.
whatever. We've been out here for years.
Correct.
I would like to know what it is that you're planning on using as strategies to get this younger population to come out.
So if the young people, and I hope they do vote, I hope they do pay attention because their future is important. But if they don't vote, I'm not going to listen. Okay. I'm here listening to you. What's important about Hamburg? What's important to you? I hear you. One thing I want to share to you, it's about articulating the message. A better life. What I realized by going through the housing projects, we have a lot of our veterans in there that have post-traumatic stress, and they've had a rough life, and they've had things that they're struggling with, and they're in our housing projects. That I didn't know. We have a lot of areas that we need to lift up people that are struggling with food stamps. So as I was going through Black Rock, I came to a house that's got the Trump sign in the window. This would have been administration number one. And it was in a rough area. And so I knocked on the door. A person of color came to the door. Within 20 seconds, I could determine he was so disabled, there was no way he was working, ever. I could tell that. And I asked him, why are you a Trump supporter? And I can't remember why he told me. But I said, do you realize they just gave billionaires a tax breaks and they're cutting food stamps? And he looked at me and he said, I rely on food stamps. I said, I know. This is why I'm talking to you, because you're voting against your own best interests. So it's getting out, it's articulating a message.
I'm sorry. I worry that the people who support the current administration, in some cases, in many cases, I think, do so because it's given them approval to dislike certain
Yes.
people and say things that they. I can't believe.
Isn't it the Archie Bunker group and he's fanning the flames?
Right.
So I'm the type, I charge. Hopefully people follow. But in the beginning, they don't. They don't. I think there's going to be threats. I think there's going to be violence. So I see what's going on in the country. I am prepared to take that head on. I know it's going to happen. There's too much at stake. There's too much emotions. It's going to happen. And I can't win because I've been through it and I'm not afraid of it. Yes, ma'am.
I just want to get back. I want to make sure I understand what you
Sure.
were saying before, especially when we were talking about the younger people.
Yeah.
Now, what I understand that you said is that if they don't want to vote, that you're just going to like.
I hope they do vote
But-
and you communicate, but you can't make people vote, right?
No, but when I worked at the Obama campaign,
Yes.
he had a whole contingency of us going out and registering young people, talking to young people.
My experience has been if I go to somebody who's never voted in their life, I am wasting my time, my energy, and my money.
I think my question was more general. Like if
Yeah.
you become congressman, in what way would you see? Do you see all the money that's in
I see
politics as being a positive or a
it's
negative?
terrible. To me, it's the
And-
number one problem in
Right.
government.
And if so,
Because the wealthy
how
control.
would you propose to fund campaigning?
So
Do you believe in public financing for campaigning?
I've seen that. But when we put it in place in New York State, I see the people who are part of the power structure are able to leverage the money and the challengers aren't.
In your
Communicate.
ideal world,
Ideal
how
world.
would you
I'd make it illegal.
finance this?
Well, to me, what do you have to finance a campaign with? If I do shoe leather, come to your house, my expenses are low. If I communicate over the email, if I could do emails to all of you, that's free. So now I can get a message out. Why can't they all do that? I think one of the biggest issues, we haven't talked about it tonight, but I think it's huge. When you disrespect Canada, your trading partners, and you alienate them, you are playing into the hands of China. When they turn and they go to China to be the trading partners, you're going to diminish your value in the world. We cannot allow this to happen.
Same thing with USAID.
Same thing there.
I was just
Yes,
thinking,
ma'am.
we're talking about, you know, you're just saying get the young people. Are you planning on going to all the universities like Buff State, UB, Binghamton,
I'll tell you my strategy right now. It's on
to
recorded.
get them involved?
I'm talking to Democrat primary voters. Because why? They have the power to decide.
Second item is about Elbows Up Western New York. That's a organization that was founded by Kate Powers, who is a good neighbor. And it is primarily in support of Canadians, as well as protesting Donald Trump's treatment of our best ally and neighbor and how that impacts the people of Western New York, but all across the nation. She'll tell us about a couple of events. And Kate will be telling us, starting off with how all of this got started.
This really grew out of just being like ashamed and appalled by what the president was saying, the way he was threatening our steadfast allies and literally our next door neighbors in Western New York. And we had seen the Elbows Up protests that were happening in Canada. And there was a protest, I think, in late February in Quebec, and a whole, like hundreds of women, I think from Quebec City to Montreal, all wore red and came out one day to make this human chain to protest fascism generally. But it was very clearly pointed towards what was happening in the United States, right? And I initially thought, oh, we should have a human chain. How can we make that happen? And I finally said to my husband in mid-March, while we were talking about all the issues, we should just stage an event. And I said, let's do it on the day that the president is going to announce what he was calling his Liberation Day, April 2nd, right? And he was going to announce all of these arbitrary and capricious tariffs at the same time. And so I said, let's counter program that. So April 2nd turned out to be just a miserable day for anybody who was there. It was freezing rain. It was a cold wind coming off of the lake, and there were still those like little mini icebergs in the Niagara River. About 200 people turned out in like a driving freezing rain. About 65 or 75 intrepid Canadians who were in Mather Arch Park across the Peace Bridge, who got out of their cars and waved their flags back at us.
Today, members of the Western New York community had their elbows up for Canada on the Shoreline Trail Bridge. This location was chosen because it looks across the river directly to Canada. Those who rallied today say they want to show they stand with Canada and oppose the tariffs. They also say they are against talk of making Canada the 51st state. Some tell us they're worried about how this will impact Western New York.
How did you get the word out to the Canadians to be across the way? How did that happen?
I was throwing a lot of spaghetti at the wall, Kathleen, on that first one. I reached out, so I'm now on a first name basis with the mayors of Fort Erie and Niagara Falls, Canada, and Niagara on the Lake. I reached out to all of their offices and to chambers of commerce, and also my brother and I just went over with flyers and like stopped in bookstores and coffee shops and said, this is happening. If you want to come out and wave to us, that would be great. So that's how we got started.
I'm sure that you got a lot of very positive feedback for that. So then what transpired?
So as we were organizing that event, I heard about a fairly similar event in Detroit and Windsor. And so I got in touch with the woman who was organizing the Detroit event. Her name is Audrey, and she's with a group called We the People Dissent, which is an indivisible group in Detroit. And we started sharing strategies and tools with each other. And then we met a guy named Jeff Smith, who was part of a group called Peace, Love, and a Handshake in Bellingham, Washington. I would say those three events or groups are kind of the initial swell of this response to what the president has been saying about Canada. And now for July 5th, we have a coalition of more than 20 organizations all across the northern border who are planning events for that day to stand in solidarity with our Canadian neighbors and to say, we oppose these tariffs, we oppose this predatory language and these threats of annexation.
And so is every state represented that's going across the United States, or are we missing
Every
one or
state is
two?
represented. Yeah.
Oh,
Skagway,
nice.
Alaska,
Nice.
Bellingham, Washington, Standpoint, Idaho, and on across. I think there are I think there are 8 events in New York State.
And I understand that you also have some hopeful plans to maybe make that a ring around the United States and do the Mexican border
So
too?
one of the groups that we've started to get to know as we've done this work, again, it's been a lot of like folks finding each other, right? Pat Nixon went to the border in San Diego in 1972 on August 16th. And it was just a chain link fence. And she like shook hands with all these Mexican folks who were on the other side of the chain link fence. And she gave a speech and she talked about how great the friendship was and the history and the allyship. And she said, hopefully this fence won't be here very long. Well, now it's completely militarized at that border, right?
Yeah.
So there's a group in San Diego called Friends of Friendship Park. And they were planning this event for August 16th, and then we met up with them. And so there's now this whole Friends Across Borders movement that is happening, which is essentially saying we are still friends with our allies, regardless of the nonsense that is coming out of this administration. Canada fought next to us at Normandy, right? Canadians joined the Union Army during the Civil War. These are our best friends. These are our next door neighbors. Pierre Trudeau said like 50 years ago that being Canada and sharing this long border with the United States was like being in bed with an elephant. Like it might be fine, but you had to always keep your eye on what the elephant was doing, right? Because and so, I think there's a history where the United States has been domineering from time to time, but never predatory in this way. This is really extraordinary. And it needs to stop. And I think, there are economic impacts to this. Obviously, there's the implications of the tariffs and the jobs that are going to get lost on both sides of the border as these tariffs grind on, right? I don't think we've seen anywhere near the fallout. Some of these things are going to take a little time, right? But jobs will be lost. Lots of Canadians are now afraid to come across the border. You can see it in Buffalo on a summer weekend when normally those bridges are, backed up all the way across as people are coming this way and we're going that way. And if you drive across now, there's it's only maybe 5 or 10 cars deep as opposed to a normal weekend. So that's a huge economic impact for us as well. And then there's Canadians being detained at the border, which has never happened before unless there was some kind of monumental manhunt happening. Canadians, a gentleman died in ICE custody last week because apparently he was epileptic and they denied him his medication. A Canadian citizen should never have been detained by CPB in the first place. I feel like if we're going to give a call to action to folks in Buffalo to call Governor Hochul and to call Tish James and to ask them to be partnering with other governors along the northern border, and also to look at making sure that maybe they consider calling up the New York National Guard to do some community service activity so that then they are not available to be called up and federalized, as happened recently in Los Angeles. So we have a couple of asks in that way. And then we're also going to ask people, because Americans are not having the same kinds of issue crossing the border that the Canadians are worried about right now. So for those who have the means, for whom it's available, we're encouraging folks to go to Canada, like go have dinner, pour a little bit of money into the Canadian economy if that is available.
Is there anything else that you think we need to know?
I think those are the biggies. So in Buffalo, we are going to be at Freedom Park at 11 a.m. on July 5th Freedom Park used to be called Broderick Park, if people don't remember. It's at the foot of West Ferry Street, just west of Niagara. We're asking folks who are able-bodied to park on Niagara Street if they're able. There is some parking on Unity Island, but there's not lots. So we're hoping people will respect that and leave it for folks who might really need to park as close as possible. And then we will be at Terrapin Point in Niagara Falls at 8 p.m. on July 5th. We have asked for them to light up the falls in alternating red and white and red, white, and blue that night.
Nice.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thanks for listening. I hope we brought you a little bit of information and a little bit of motivation to keep your head in the game. And next time there will be at least some coverage of the Langworthy protest that is taking place on Wednesday the 9th at Sunset Bay in Irving at 3:30 if you want to join us.